Hayden, let's talk about the next section in the course, which is Understand Generational Differences. And I know there have been a lot of changes to this part of the course. So, for example, in the Teach to Learn section, for the generation card exercise, the facilitator guide asks participants to take 5 to 7 minutes to complete that exercise. However, we hear from facilitators that it takes them more like 10 to 20 minutes to complete it. So I wondered what suggestions you might have for facilitators, especially if time is tight.
I'm glad you asked that question. Facilitators, cut someplace else. This is not the place you want to cut time. Now, we didn't change the facilitator manual because that's how the resource videos were filmed. But what we've learned is people typically take 15 and often 20 minutes in their groups of 4 teaching through these cards. Don't cut here. This is what participants say is the most important part of the course for them. This is where they get their ahas. This is where they get their paradigm shifts. Now, we have made it easier by changing the instructions. So we've now asked people to only teach 3 points on the front of the card and 3 points on the back of the card. And that helps some folks who would literally, didn't happen often, but some folks would literally read through every bullet point on front and back because they were nervous. And then that group would then take 25 minutes or 20 minutes and all the others would be done. So we've changed the instructions to make it easier for people.
That's great. And I understand you've made updates to the information on the cards. So are those big changes?
The changes aren't big changes to the generational cards, but there have been a number of small tweaks. Most of them are there for precision and for clarity. They clarify a couple of historical parts, and we use language that makes them more precise. There have been some changes, however, made to the millennial cards, because that's one of the things that people would ask, when are you going to update the millennial section? And so since the book had hundreds of hours of research done, especially around all the new studies on millennials, we did make a couple of changes. We added dialogue to the section on self-esteem because parents not only raise their children with self-esteem, but they also raise them with dialogue, and that has some real implications for coaching and the business application of this material. And then we deleted realistic. We dropped that from the list of characteristics because while the millennials are realistic, it's a vague word without greater explanation, and the Sticking Points book doesn't go into that characteristic of the millennials in detail. So we just dropped it because we felt like there were others that were clearer and more helpful.
Okay, so I want to ask you, at this point in the course, you've introduced the concept of sticking points. Mm-hmm. And I think this is so important to clarify. First of all, I know we'll get into more detail with sticking points in another video. So it seems that the term has a double meaning. On the one hand, participants may look at it in a negative way, meaning that it's, sticking point raises contentions. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, someone might see it as a positive because it's bringing something together and sticking something together. So I wondered if you could tell us how you address this in the course.
Well, that was the exact reason why the publisher selected that title, because of the double meaning of sticking points. Not only are there the 12 sticking points where the generations can come apart, but those same 12 sticking points, if you work through them thoroughly and lead through them rather than try to manage them, can give a great place for a team to stick together, for a team to bond together, and for a team to make a stand. And so that's why that language was used. A couple of places we weave it into the manual, but one of the spots you'll want to specifically focus on sticking points is right there around the leveraging of generational differences. People will teach through the cards, and then you ask the question, what are the strengths of the generations? And this is a place where you can address how sticking points has a double meaning, and we wrote that right in the facilitator manual update.
Wonderful. So another clarifying point, because I think this is so key to everything in the course. Sometimes participants question why we are learning these generational comparisons. So for example, with the generational stereotyping exercise in the guide, we really use that to show that no one's in a box. And so to be careful not to put anyone in a box. So how does learning generational differences help us if we're learning to apply this to groups rather than to individuals and avoiding some of those, pitfalls of putting people into boxes?
There was an engineer who recently said, I don't know why you're teaching us these comparisons and then turning around and telling us not to apply them to individuals.
Exactly.
Well, here's how you handle that when that comes up. You say generalizations, like anything in sociology, apply to a large number of people. Pharmaceutical advertisements, for example, have disclaimers legally that say this product may hurt you. Well, they would never get approved if they hurt most folks. In other words, you can apply the generalization with that medical drug, or you can apply a generational generalization to most people, but it won't apply to any one individual in that generation. And that simple explanation helps most people understand that while these generalizations help us know where to start a conversation, real leadership is about focusing and getting to know individuals.